Hey everybody, it's Brooke with The Buttered Home and welcome to my messy kitchen. Today we have a real treat in store for you. This is one of our favorite side dish casseroles that also can be converted to be a whole meal if you wish. Now, this is our broccoli and brown rice casserole and it is fantastic. It's chock full of vegetables and yummy brown sauce that just brings everything together beautifully, and it would be perfect to add some leftover pot roast to so that you could have a hearty meal. Now, we have done a few things ahead of time because there are several steps involved, and we are going to show you those now. Okay, there is a little prep work involved in all this, but it's really not that time consuming. What we have here is 3 cups of beef broth that I'm going to add in 2 cups of 2% milk. You can use whole milk, you can use skim milk, it does not matter. You just want a beef and milk mixture, and we are just going to turn our heat up because all we want to do is just simmer it over about medium heat and just bring it to a boil. So I am just going to stir that together and make sure that it is incorporated one into the other, and then we'll bring that to a boil. And it should happen pretty quickly because I had my broth hot and my milk room temperature, but you don't have to. Those are just some things that I do to kind of speed the process up. And once we bring that to a boil, then we just want to take it off the heat and set it to the side, and we'll cover it with a lid just to kind of keep it warm. We don't want it cold, but coming to room temperature is probably okay, but try to keep it as warm as you can. So we're just going to bring that to a boil so that that milk fat can get incorporated with the fat of the beef broth, and it just become one beautiful sauce. This is part of our sauce for the beef and broccoli, or the broccoli brown rice casserole. And technically you could say beef because it does have beef broth in it. And this is a great side dish, but you could totally cook or reuse like a roast and add it to this if you wanted a protein in all one pan. All right, we are coming to a boil, so I am going to lower my heat just to bring it to a simmer. And then we're going to talk about our vegetables that we have over here. So there are a couple of different ways that you can make this casserole. I like to use my Dutch oven. And the reason why is because I can cook everything in here and not have to pour it into a pan. However, once you get everything kind of cooked together, you can pour it into a casserole dish or a throwaway pan if you need to, if you're going to be sharing that casserole with someone. All right, so we are simmering just a little bit. You can see the bubbles breaking on the top. And once that happens, we'll turn the heat off, and then we'll cover it and we'll set it to the side so that it can stay warm. Now, we are going to make our roux base for the casserole next, and that is going to involve 3.5 tablespoons of butter. And then we're gonna have about a 1/2 cup of celery. Now, I just have to be honest with you. I am gonna practice what I preach, and I did not have celery, but I did have green peppers, and green peppers are a good substitute if you like them in place of celery. They add a little more flavor than celery, but you don't get the traditional celery onion mix whenever you use them in place, but you do get a little bit more flavor. So the recipe calls for a 1/2 cup of chopped celery, but I'm using a 1/2 cup of green bell pepper. Then we have a cup of chopped onion, and I had red onion. You can use white or yellow if you choose. And then, of course, every good roux base has flour, and we like plain white lily. All right, so I have simmered enough, so I am going to cover this and set it over here to the side so we can have it for later when we begin to mix everything up. So now I'm going to add in my Dutch oven and light my fire back. And then I'm going to take that 3½ tablespoons of butter and add it to the pan and let it start to melt. And that should happen pretty fast. I'm going to turn my fire up just a tad because this is enameled cast iron, and once it gets hot, it stays hot, but it does take it just a minute to get hot. So once the butter melts, then we're going to add in our peppers and our onions, or celery if you are cooking along with this video and you have celery. And then we will just cook those just until they become translucent and soft. So I'm going to let that butter melt. And that is not taking long. See, once that enamel cast iron gets hot, it tends to get evenly hot, and then something magical happens. It holds heat well, you don't lose heat. All right, so we're gonna put in our onions. I know my butter's not completely melted, but it's melted enough that we can add in that cup of chopped onion. And then we are gonna add in our green bell pepper or celery, if you're using celery. And then we're just gonna cook them in the butter just for a minute until they kind of sweat and soften. And I'm gonna add just a touch of salt, and that helps that process along. And I'm gonna go ahead and add in my pepper too. We do, you know, just about 1/4 teaspoon of each, just for a little bit of flavor. But you're gonna get the majority of your flavor from your beef broth milk mixture that we just did. And look how pretty that is already. I love the color in this, whether you use celery or green bell pepper. It just adds just that beautiful pop of color in there. And of course, y'all know I love red or purple onions, depending on, you know, what you want to call them. I call them red onions. But a lot of people call them purple onions, and that's fine either way. All right, so we have a good amount of heat here, and I'm just going to turn it down just a tad. And it usually only takes 1 or 2 minutes in that 3½ tablespoons of butter for everything to kind of get soft. All right, so now I have a 1/2 cup of chopped mushrooms, and those are going to go in, and those just need to wilt and cook through, and they will pretty fast. They'll cook down. I like to buy these baby Bella mushrooms. They seem to have a lot more flavor than the white mushrooms, but you choose either what you have on hand or what your preference is, and either way will be fine. And I also go ahead and spend those few cents extra and get them sliced. And that way I just have to run my knife through them, kind of slice, you know, just chop them up just a little bit more if they're kind of sliced, kind of big. All right, so I'm gonna lower my heat just a tad. We're down at about medium low. And then I'm gonna add in 2 tablespoons of minced garlic. And we do that at the end so that garlic won't burn. and just gonna bring it up to temperature, keeping it moving so it won't burn on the bottom of the pan. And then I'm going to add in about 1/4 cup of plain flour. And this is, of course, our roux base, but we've done it with vegetables. And we're just going to cook that for about a minute until that flour taste goes away. And I'm going to grab my milk broth mixture and bring it back over, because once that flour cooks off, then we're going to add that in to make the beautiful velvety sauce for this broccoli and brown rice casserole, which you also see has mushrooms and onions and green peppers or celery, depending on what you use. So now I'm going to slowly drizzle that in, simply because everything is hot. Everything is hot, so we don't want to get too vigorous with that and end up scalding ourselves. Now we want to add in 1/2 cup of either mozzarella or cheddar jack and 1/2 cup of cheddar. We're just gonna mix that in with our whisk. And this will continue to thicken, especially after we add in our rice, which we are about to do. Just get my bearings here. And one of the things that I like to mention is you can use traditional long grain brown rice if you'd like. However, your cook time is going to be about 40 minutes in the oven. So I like using quick brown rice because it cuts that cook time in half. So at this point, we are going to measure out 1 1/2 cups of quick cooking brown rice, and we're going to add that in. So I'm using a 1/2 cup measure. All right, so there is 1 1/2 cups of that, and I'm just going to stir that in. And you'll see we're starting to get thick. When you add that rice in, it's just something about that starch in it. Even brown rice has some starch in it. It helps to almost instantly thicken things. All right, and then right here, I have a 1/2 cup of sour cream and a 1/2 cup of Duke's mayonnaise. And we're gonna add those right in. Now, a good healthy swap here would be just to use about a tablespoon of that mayonnaise and then about just less than a cup of unsweetened, unflavored Greek yogurt. But now, if you're doing the flour and all that butter and the milk, you might as well just let this be a splurge and just mind your portion. All right, so I'm just going to make sure that that mayonnaise and sour cream gets mixed in over low heat really well. And then I'm going to cover this and carefully place it into a 350-degree oven for about 20 minutes. And that's why I like doing this in this Dutch oven, because you can simply have it all in the oven and serve out of here too. So it really kind of helps things along. All right, so I can tell with my whisk that's starting to get thick. So I'm just gonna turn my heat off and continue to stir until I don't see any bits of sour cream and mayonnaise anymore, and that shouldn't take very long. And then whenever this is done, we will come back and we will assemble it all right before your very eyes, and then it'll have one more cook time in the oven, just kind of to bring everything together. So we'll be right back. Okay, we are back. We have finished a 20-30 minute cook time on our glorious sauce and our brown rice, and I'm gonna open that up and let the steam escape because it's hot. So the wonderful thing about this is the majority of your cooking time is done ahead of time. So all you really have to do at this point are just a couple of things. So the first thing we're gonna do is I have used a bag of steamable broccoli and I've drained it. So we're gonna dump that broccoli in, and this is about 3 cups of steamed broccoli. And I love those microwave packs because they just really make your life so much easier. Now, just like I talked to you about in the prep video, you could certainly take this, and I did when we shot it earlier in the year, and pour it into a lightly greased casserole dish or a throwaway pan so that you can take it a little easier. But when I'm making this at home, I just like to keep it in the Dutch oven because everything else that we do, we can do right in this same single pan, and it really ends up being the same. So now let's talk about the topping. The topping, we have the other half of our cheese. We have a half a cup of mozzarella or cheddar jack if you want a little spice, and a half a cup of cheddar cheese grated that I have in the bowl here. And then we have, oh my goodness, and I can't remember my measurement on my panko. I think it's a cup, so let me just look. So yes, we have 1 cup of panko breadcrumbs, and I like those because they're just a little bit bigger than traditional breadcrumbs. But by all means, if you have traditional breadcrumbs, or if you don't, you can use butter crackers crushed up, just about the equivalent of a cup. And we're gonna mix that in with our cheese. And I'm just gonna lightly mix that together so that our ratio to our cheese to our breadcrumbs is about even. And then y'all, this recipe calls for like 1/3 of a cup of butter. So we used 3.5 tablespoons in our pan here to saute our vegetables. And then I have the rest of it, which is probably about another 2 tablespoons of butter. And I melted it in the microwave. And we're just gonna add it in here to our breadcrumbs and our cheese. And one thing I like to note, whenever you're doing a topping like this that has melted butter and cheese in it, you want to let that melted butter come to room temperature because you really don't want to melt your cheese at this stage. So we just want to make sure that we get that butter all throughout so that it saturates all of the breadcrumbs and all of the cheese. And then you could even add just a little bit of parsley to this if you wanted to for more color. And then we're gonna take it and we're just gonna sprinkle it over the top of our rice. And then I'm just gonna use my fork, or you could use a spatula, and just kind of spread it out a little bit. Okay, so now this is gonna go back under the broiler for just about 3 to 5 minutes. I'm gonna keep an eye on it until that cheese gets melted and the top gets browned, and then we are ready to serve. So we'll be right back with you. Okay everybody, we are back and we have a gorgeous topping. You just want to listen for that sizzle, and you just want to make sure that cheese is melted and that you are just a little bit brown. And I like to just tap it and you can hear it, and it's fantastic. And then we're gonna dip some out and you get to see that glorious cheesiness. And it's really hot as we just took it out of the oven. But look how beautiful it is. All that brown rice, because we use the quick rice, you can be sure it's done. I always test it before we do this step, and it's absolutely wonderful. That broccoli's already been steamed, so it's nice and green and pretty. And the onions and whatnot, the peppers that are in here, they've just disappeared, and you're left with this beautiful, beautiful brown sauce with the brown rice and the broccoli. And the brown rice is a better grain for you than white rice, but you can substitute white rice for this recipe. Just be sure that if you use the quick cooking white rice, that the cook time will be the same, or if you use traditional white rice, then it will need to cook just a little bit longer too. Brown rice though, if you use regular long grain brown rice, will take about 40 minutes to cook. So you'll double your cook time, and just test everything. Everybody's oven is different, so I just like to tell you to do that. But this recipe, along with all of our others, can be found at thebutteredhome.com. We hope you'll visit us there. Also, make sure that you're following us on our social channels at Facebook and Instagram. From time to time, we cook live there. And be sure to watch all of our videos over at YouTube and ding the bell to subscribe so that you can be notified when we drop new videos like this one. So we've got some brown rice casserole that we need to eat. So we will be back with you next week. And until then, from the buttered home to your home, we love y'all. Bye.